It's Pan Those Eyeshadows time. Let's do it. Really quickly, this is a project that was created by Alexi. I'll have her information linked in the description box. She has a couple years worth of Pan Those Eyeshadows content to watch, so I definitely recommend going and checking her out. But the premise of this project pan is to randomly generate eyeshadows and try to hit pan on them, and then once you do hit pan on one, you roll in a new one. Everyone does it a little bit differently. For mine, I like to focus on 5 eyeshadows at any given time, and I choose 2 from my easy to pan category, 2 from a sort of hard but not too hard to hit pan on category, and then 1 from the really hard to pan category. And I do have 2 pans, so I'm excited to get rolling so we can roll in 2 new shades at the end of the video. Let me show you the eyeshadows that I've been working on for the past few weeks. The first eyeshadow that I hit pan on, I wasn't surprised. I was really close to hitting pan on it last month, and that is Tuscan Fun by Colourpop. It's from the Limoncello palette, and I only needed to use this an additional 5 times to hit pan. Total, it took me 39 uses in this project to hit pan. I may have reached for it a few times before that, but it was a relatively unused shadow before I rolled it in. It was a really beautiful warm brown. I liked using this as a crease shade, and that was the majority of the ways that I used it. I had put Tuscan Fun in my easy to pan category. It was a relatively easy to use formula, and I could pair it with lots of other eyeshadows, so I do think while it was relatively easy to hit pan on, I didn't expect it to take that long to hit pan because the actual size of the pan is very thin. The second shade I hit pan on, I also wasn't surprised because it had a really big dip in it last month as well, and that's a single from Tarte in the shade Poker Face. This was a beautiful icy sort of pinky shimmer shade, and I did use this all over the lid. I didn't use it in the inner corner because it was a little bit deep, but over the past month I used it an additional 13 times in order to hit pan. And I used it a total of 37 times in this project to hit pan, but I had reached for it a number of times beforehand. I don't know exactly how many times. Poker Face was in my middle category, so I knew it wouldn't be the easiest thing to hit pan on, but I didn't think it would be the hardest either. And I do agree, I think that this does belong in the intermediate category. I loved using this. I love shades like this, so I'm excited to see what I roll in its place, but I am gonna miss it a tiny bit. The other 3 shades I didn't hit pan on yet, but I do have great progress, and I'm going to start with Orange Soda from the Soft Glam Mini Palette by ABH, and this is going to be harder to pan than I thought. I did put Orange Soda in the intermediate category because even though it is an ABH matte, which those tend to be more loosely pressed, they tend to have a lot more kick up, and so they are relatively easy to hit pan on. I knew that this one was a more hard pressed version of it, and so even though I had used it several times before rolling it into the project, it still looked unused. Over the past month I used it an additional 12 times. Total so far in this project I've used it 28 times, and I am very surprised. This is actually going to be, it's going to take longer than I thought it would, even though I do use a pretty generous amount because I use it as a transition shade. I don't have any problem with that. This is a really great shade to start a lot of really autumnal looks that I want to create right now, including the one that I'm wearing today. This is the perfect time to have this sort of shade in my quintet, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's going to make it all that more satisfying once I do eventually hit pan on it. The next 2 shades I rolled in last month, so I wasn't expecting to hit pan on them immediately, especially because one of them is my hardest shade. And I'll start with that one. It's from Shroud Cosmetics, and it's from the It's Friggin' Bats palette. And the shade is Dairy, which is a matte, very dark, plummy, cool-toned purple. And I ended up loving this. It kind of replaced the Shroud Cosmetics Tombstone shade that I had pan on previously, and that I used in a very similar way. I use these as a base, and then I put a shimmery shade on top, and it deepens the shimmer shade and adds a richness to it and just adds something special to it that I think is perfect for this time of year when I am going for more intense, maybe slightly vampier looks. This is much darker than Tombstone that I was panning previously, and so I don't use as much of it, and I do need to be a little bit more careful so that I'm not making a mess. But I used this 12 times in the last month, which I think is really great. It's causing me to reach for this palette a lot more than I normally do, which is awesome. That's one of my favorite kind of side effects of the Pan Those Eyeshadows project. And it is getting a little bit of a dip in there, but these pans are pretty thick, and like I said, I don't use a lot of product, even though I am covering the majority of my eyelid every time I reach for it. So this one's a long haul one. It's in my hardest category for a reason. I'm loving it. This is the perfect time of the year to wear a shade like this, so I'm really enjoying it. You'll see I created a lot of like cool tone purple looks this month. The last shade I also rolled in last month is Mr Sandman from Colourpop. It's housed in the Go and Coconuts palette for me because these are all magnetic and can be moved around, but I think this was originally in the It's My Pleasure palette. It's where the shade Palm Reader originally was, which that one was like a white shimmery shade. I ended up giving that to my mom because she specifically asked me for a shade like that, and I was more than happy to pop it out and give it to her. So I put this in its place a couple months ago, and that's what was there whenever I randomly generated Palm Reader, but I'm pretty sure the shade originally was Mr. Sandman. I really like pairing this with burgundy shades, and I also just like using it on its own as like the main shimmery shade all over the lid. It pairs beautifully with Dairy whenever I'm going for like those cool tone purpley blue looks. It's also incredibly chunky. Like I have to be so careful when I reach for this so that like entire chunks of the shadow aren't coming out and being wasted. So often I'm just using my finger pad to grab some product and put it on my lid. And this past month I've used it 9 times. I was focusing more on Poker Face as like my lid shimmer shade because I did want to hit pan on it and roll it out. I don't know what other 2 shades I'll be rolling in, but hopefully none of them will compete with this one so that I can focus on it as my main lid shade, because this is a really beautiful time of the year to wear something like this. I don't have any bonus pans to share this time, but because I did hit 2 pans on my collection, I did have an increase in my pan percentage, so let's get into that. Last month I had 31 pans out of 235 shadows, giving me a pan percentage of 13.2%. It has jumped up to 14%. I now have 33 pans out of 235 eyeshadows. So 14% is like roughly 1/7 of my eyeshadow collection, which is kind of cool. I have mentioned I don't really have a specific goal in mind, but for me, the more pans I have, the more that it means I'm really loving and using my eyeshadow collection. And yeah, just the implications of getting to use my eyeshadow more is good, so obviously I want that percentage to increase. A lot of the eyeshadow looks I created weren't too different from the ones I created the month before, so I only have 3 eyeshadow looks to share with you. I think I'm going to try to keep it around 3 looks, and that way I can choose like the 3 best or my 3 favorite looks I created over the course of the month. The first one was a bit of an experiment. I don't know how much I loved how this looked in real life, but I used Dairy all over the lid, and I also created kind of like a wing and more of like an angular shape on my eyes, and then I put Poker Face over it. I applied it wet on top to kind of create like a deeper, more sultry taupey pink color. And then I have Phantom from Makeup Geek, which is a duochrome. It flashes purple. I have that on the inner corner. And I liked this. I thought this looked cool. Probably not an everyday look. The second one is the look I'm wearing today. So I wanted to reach for my Shroud Arcana palette more because this is like the perfect time of the year to wear that. So I have Alchemy all over my lid, a little bit in my crease and on my lower lash line. And then on the inner half, I used Marvel from the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette, and that is like a lighter green. And like I mentioned earlier, I do have ABH Orange Soda as like the starter shade just to add a little bit of warmth in the crease, and mixing that orange and those 2 different types of greens created kind of like a murky eye color. And in both this look and the first look that I talked about, I have Charlotte Tilbury's lip pencil in Pillow Talk on my lips. And for look number 3, I really leaned into the mauve cool toned purple look. So I do have Makeup Geek's Petal Pressure in the crease, and I have Makeup Geek's Phantom, which is that purple duochrome on the inner corner. And then all over the lid and on the outer thirds, I have Dairy from Shroud. I applied Poker Face wet all over the lid, and then I put Sandman on top. I just dusted on top with my fingers just to add a little bit more dimension to the color. And then I went back and I put Dairy on the outer third again to make sure that was more deepened. And then I have the mauve lip pencil from NYX on my lips. I love these types of color stories. I think they're very flattering for me, and I love wearing them during this time of year, so I did this type of look a lot. Now it's time for my favorite part of these updates, and that is when I get to roll in new shades to finish my quintet that I'll be focusing on for the next month. I have a shade from the easy category and from the medium category to roll in. So I'm going to start with the easy one. First, I'm going to swatch the 3 shades that I already have in my quintet. And I have my Pretty Random app up. From the easy category, I have 40 shades to choose from. So I have made the maximum 40, and I am going to click randomize. And the number I got is 31. And that is another Colourpop shade. It's Solitaire, and I don't remember what palette that's from. I'm thinking maybe from the Making Mauves palette. Yes, Solitaire is from Making Mauves, and it's this top middle shade right here, and that is the perfect crease color to go with those two purple shades that are currently in my quintet. That's awesome. I've actually been reaching for this corner shade a lot to set my crease, to set my lids, because even though it is a little bit deeper than my skin tone, if I use a fluffy brush and just put it in the crease, it kind of matches. And that is perfect since I'm already reaching for that palette. I just hit pan on Bicoastal, I think in my last update. So this is getting a ton of use, which I love mauve eyeshadows, so that's fine by me. Now I get to choose a shade from my intermediate or medium category, and I have 126 shades to choose from, so I've changed my maximum to 126. And the next shade I'm working on is number 46. Oh, this is from my Geology Pilbara palette. Okay, so the shade is Chert. I think that's the correct way to pronounce it. I looked it up and I think it's Chert. It's spelled C-H-E-R-T. And this is a duochrome, I'm pretty sure. It has a reddish base and then a gold flip. That is beautiful. It reminds me of, I think it was Colourpop Come and Get It, and also Cleona Prophecy, which also has a similar shift to it. This is like a harder pressed shimmer though. When I went to swatch it, I did have to push down to get more pigment on my finger, and I did give the shade Pard Pan. So whenever I use it, I will likely try to grab for a scratcher brush to scratch the product and then pick that product up to use it. I'm gonna try my best not to waste it, but that is a really beautiful shade. It's very unique because it's kind of like a corally red color as the base, and then the golden shift makes it look like super peachy, but it's very unique. I don't think I have anything like that in my collection. And while it doesn't go with the three purple shades, I do think it goes really well with Orange Soda, given that they're both warmer shades. So I think that this shade will be really cool to pair with burgundies and with like burnt oranges and mustards. And it already has like a coppery gold, a like burnt orange, brick red, and then a more red matte too. So I have some shades in here that I'll get to pull to pair with this. I think this one's gonna be a challenge. I think this one's gonna take a while, but I don't know how thick these pans are. And once I start using it, I'll have a better idea. But yeah, I really don't know how long it's gonna take me to hit pan on this. So we'll see. Another thing I'm really glad about is all of the palettes that I'm reaching for are relatively small, so I can very easily fit all of them in my everyday makeup drawer and be able to access them all. Like, I love that the majority of my palettes are smaller like that. I am already thinking of ideas to play around with that bottom shade. I'm really glad with the quintet that I got. It's very season appropriate, but still shades that I tend to reach for all year round, like these mauve purple colors. I do have a Pan Those Eyeshadows list in my description box, so if you'd like to see more content like this, I do have a couple other creators playlists in the description box for you. But in the meantime, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video.